course I am. Smile for me, Chris. Hi.
My husband and I had been struggling to get pregnant for quite a while, and finally in 2016, we found out that we were pregnant. We were over the moon excited. Everything went smooth. I didn't have any conditions going into it or anything that had me scared. I was supposed to be discharged 3 days after I gave birth, and on that third day was when I really started to feel bad. My white blood cell count was elevated. I had fever, and I was jackhammering in the bed with chills. I was so cold. Instead of digging into why I was having those temperature fluctuations, they called the maintenance people to my room to come and check the thermostat. At first, I felt like my heart was just gonna beat out of my chest. I felt real anxious. I couldn't stand up. I would get out of breath. But all the doctors kept telling me, well, you just had a baby, you're exhausted. It's normal to feel anxious after. You're probably just nervous about being a new mom. Everything that I said was just kind of explained away or brushed off. I felt like they're the experts here, and maybe this is normal. Maybe this is what all new moms feel like after childbirth. When they sent me home, they gave me a prescription for anxiety medicine. I don't feel like they ever took me seriously. They decided that I was an anxious new mom, when in reality, my body was shutting down on me. I tried to care for my newborn son, but I couldn't. I couldn't even care for myself. I started to get sicker, and my body started to shut down on me. I was coughing up blood. Finally, my mom convinced me that something was really wrong and we needed to go back to the hospital to see what was going on. I was still very nervous to go back because they had already told me that I was fine. I remember on the way there feeling like it wasn't going to change anything.
When we went back to the labor and delivery and she was admitted, she just kind of lingered there. There was really no action.
They didn't really have any answers. I laid in a bed there and continued to grow weaker and sicker.
When I saw her blood pressure dropping, I brought it up to the nurse. I said, her blood pressure's getting lower. And she said, oh no, it was that low when she gave birth. I looked at her chart. But finally, in the middle of the night, a doctor came in, and that's when I first heard that her kidneys were shutting down. It took probably a couple hours before the rapid response nurse came. He asked her how she was doing, and I told him she's not okay. And he looked at her chart, and he said, follow me. And he took her up to the ICU, and that's where I found out how really sick she was.
Once I was in the ICU, that's when they started to tell my family that I had gone into septic shock. My kidneys had shut down, my liver. They said I had developed an infection in my uterus that had led to the septic shock. All of my organs had started to shut down, and they weren't sure that I was going to make it.
For the next 7 or 8 days, she never woke up. They had her intubated the whole time. They were pumping her full of medication to try and raise her blood pressure, and one of the doctors told me people who are as sick as her are usually on 1 blood pressure medication. We have her on 3, and 2 are maxed out. We can't give her any more.
At one point, they told my family to call those that were closest to me to say goodbye because the odds were not looking good.
I didn't want anybody to come say goodbye to her, because if they came to say goodbye to her, that was it. So I didn't let my family come. I told everybody, stay away. I couldn't give up on her.
I laid in that bed fighting, and during that time, my husband had to start thinking about, what if he has to raise this baby on his own? What if my son grows up without a mom? That's the scariest part of all of this, is that by not listening to me, by brushing me off, by me not knowing those warning signs, it created this perfect storm that nearly cost me my life.
About 7 days in, it looked like she was gonna pull through. They told us that the following day they would take her off the sedation.
I woke up so confused, and I was strapped to a hospital bed. I didn't know where I was at. I didn't know if I had had a baby. I didn't know if all of this had been a dream or a nightmare. I had a tube down my throat. I couldn't talk, couldn't communicate. I was terrified. The very first thing I remember was actually tracing the letters C-R-U-Z into somebody's hands. That's my son's name, is Cruz. I wanted to know, was it real? Did I have a baby? Is he okay? That's all I could think about was, where's my baby?
And I told her Cruz is fine. He's at home. Chez's family is taking really good care of him. He's healthy. Don't worry about him.
It wasn't until probably 4 or 5 days after I had that breathing tube removed where people could start talking to me about like what had happened. The way that they explained sepsis to me was that I had developed an infection and my body was trying to fight so hard that it started to attack itself. I had to learn how to walk again because I couldn't really hold up my own weight during that time, and my breathing was still real heavy. I couldn't eat, I couldn't swallow. My skin on my hands and my feet started to peel. When I finally got transferred to a regular room, they said that my son could come and visit. While I was excited to see him, it hurt a lot. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. I shouldn't have been in a wheelchair in a hospital. I should have been at home with him. After I was released, I was walking a little bit. By that time, I could stand up on my own. I was really upset about all the time that I had missed out on with my son and with my husband. Emotionally, it was really hard too, just watching everybody get to care for him and wanting to do that, but physically not being able to do that. And my mom had been encouraging me to walk. Every day it was like, okay, let's see if you can walk to the end of your driveway. Until one day she said, let's try to make it around the park. But I remember like being a quarter away around the park and I was just out of breath.
So we went and saw the doctor and he said, you know what, we need to get your lungs checked out. When she came out, she had tears in her eyes and she said, let's go to the emergency room. I have blood clots in my lungs.
I was on blood thinners for about 3 months after that. I would say for like 6 months, life was chaotic. I think the biggest lesson that I learned was you really have to advocate for yourself. We as women tend to know our bodies better than anyone. There definitely has to be a balance of trusting your medical team to know what's going on, but also relying on your own instinct and pushing harder when they say, well, that could be normal. Well, what if it's not normal? Can we try this? Well, what about this? And asking those questions. It's also important for all new moms to know the signs of what to look for, not only with sepsis, but any of the urgent maternal warning signs. The list is available from the Alliance for Innovation on Maternal Health. So as a result of my experience, I actually became involved with the Maternal Sepsis Community Leadership Board. And through this board, we're really working to educate patients, their families, and even healthcare professionals, and really empower them with the tools and resources that they need to help improve maternal health outcomes. We want to empower women with the urgent maternal warning signs. We want them to be aware of a number of different things that can happen as a result of pregnancy or childbirth. The reality is that sometimes there is bias and sometimes things do go wrong. So we want to provide the tools to enable people to advocate for themselves. We also created a guide for medical professionals. It's called the Warning Signs Follow-Up Guide. This tool provides questions to help medical professionals thoroughly assess the patient calling in with their concerns and recommend the right course of action for them. You can access all of these tools and resources by scanning the QR code on the screen to access things like our advocacy language and actions, the Warning Signs Follow-Up Guide, and the Urgent Maternal Warning Signs.
that's a wrap.